First of all, then, congratulations and thank you for your time this morning. I know you're a man in hot demand, and particularly hot demand this week. You saw the film for the first time on Thursday night,
Yeah, no, they're a completed film with all of the bits and pieces. Yeah.
and what did you think?
I thought it was a good film.
Yeah,
It's a relief, yeah.
it must be.
You never know.
Yeah, is that what it's like? Because I mean, you must have. I mean, there's been a bit of a buzz around the Dark Horse. You must have had a pretty good vibe going into it. But I guess there's
Yeah, no, I was confident that we had a very strong team.
Yeah.
And everybody was on top of their game. You know, great writer, director, incredibly talented. He over-delivered, you know, he exceeded expectations.
Yeah.
James. And Tom, great producer. The kids made the film, really. They're the heart of the film. So when you got those little heartbreakers led by James Rolliston, you know, that's a kind of it's a winning sort of formula there. They're
combination.
amazing,
Yeah.
yeah. And, you know, and along with this great story, you know, it's a very uplifting story, I think, ultimately.
It's a particularly uplifting story and a particularly interesting character. Not, am I fair to describe Genesis Portini as a complicated character?
Oh, yeah.
A really complicated
a very
character.
complex, conflicted, but ultimately just a man with a huge heart who, despite his struggles, and we pick up with Jen at a time of his life where he's turning his life around, and he's had huge struggles that we are not in the film previous. You know, he's had this other whole life, but we pick him up at a time where he starts to figure out how to manage his bipolar issues with medication and trying to find a positive thing that he can feel good about, contribution, you know, and working with people and helping his community. And that's what his last 10, 15 years of his life was about,
How was it for you then when these young guys, because they are young guys, the producer and directing team, James Napier Robertson, who wrote the film, how was it when they came to you with this character?
Oh, well, they kind of came to me with a script that was initially how it was, and while there were sort of elements that were really beautifully developed, certain scenes and stuff, there were other aspects of it that were like, that doesn't match, and I was confused. Yeah. It almost felt like there were two different writers, to the point where I asked James, like, did you write that scene? You know, it's like,
yeah.
He goes, yeah, of course I wrote that scene. You know, I was like, well, what's this part about? And so we, you know, and my first response is I passed on it, largely because the character was pretty impossible, and I had no idea how I was gonna portray the character.
Yeah.
Like they was going, you got to put on all this weight. I said, well, that's not going to happen.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do that. You know, and so again, it didn't have teeth. It's like, well, that's not going to happen. You know, it's like, I'm not going to do that. So ultimately, we got to a point, and I didn't know who they were. I was like, well, who are you guys? What have you done? You know?
Yeah.
And I saw their film Harry Jensen. While it was very well made film for what it was, it didn't in any way, in my mind, relate to what this film needed to be.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of question marks, and they were very, very confident, and that's always like a bit of a, you know, I'm always a bit worried, suspect of guys that are just overly confident. I'm like, all right.
Yeah. So how'd they win you over?
Firstly, by their diligence and their work ethic. Well, we know, fair enough, they had talent. I could see talent, but there was no track record. So I was like, well, they were respectful in that every time I challenged something, they responded by working harder, you know. And so they had a good work ethic, and the challenges didn't seem to faze them. I was like, okay, cool, we just have to work harder. We have to dig deeper. We have to find a way to make it work. So that was encouraging. But ultimately, they sent me a documentary by Jim Marbrook about the real Genesis Portini. And when I watched that, there was something so, you know, magnetic about the real guy that I thought, this is an impossible role. Like, these roles do not come along. And I thought, well, I don't know how we going to make this work. And then they wanted me to read for the role. I was like, dude, how am I going to convince anyone that I could do this?
Yeah.
It's just going to create doubt in your minds that I could even do it. And I don't even want to. I had to get to a point where I was like, look, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I don't even know if you guys can do this.
Yeah.
But if we're both going to take a risk, then
let's both take a risk.
Let's jump off the edge and see what happens.
Yeah.
mind you, through this process, it was a tough process. My conversations with James were encouraging. Like, he was up for the risk.
Yeah.
He was convinced that because I don't know how do you put this. How I work is I'm much more focused on process and relationships and contribution. That's how I think things get done properly. If you're constantly like wanting an instant fix for things, then you're gonna get a short-changed process,
Right.
and you're not gonna dig deep enough. And
Right.
so I always focus on process. Like, how I don't want to know whether or not I can do it. I want to know what process is going to lead me in the right direction to getting the job done.
Right.
And so we shouldn't be talking about whether or not I can do it or whether you can do it, because we can both fail. Failure is always, although it's not an option, it's always a possibility.
Yeah.
So we can't focus on that. What we have to do is like think, well, what resources do we have? What ideas have we got? What commonalities do we have? And let's just dig down into that and develop a process we can make our way there. And in the end, at the end of the process, I did put on like a huge amount of weight. I personally like figured out a prosthetic so that I could have no teeth.
Yeah.
I did that when I was in LA. I did everything that I said I wasn't going to do.
Yeah.
He did invite me to go method. I did go method, in terms of like living in the character and the role.
I mean, these things
For months at a time.
fascinate people who haven't been exposed to the world and perhaps aren't aware of the dedication you bring to roles like this. Because I mean, putting on 30 kgs, where do you start for something like that in the first place?
Beer.
Right. Is that it? Do you just have to be a bit of a slob? Yeah.
You hammer that beer. Yeah.
Wow.
Every chance.
Yeah. The whole time knowing that at some stage you're going to have to work it off.
I think the first month I felt that, and then also I had a very good advisor who said, actually my daughter, who said, sumo wrestlers eat lots and lots of food and then they have a sleep, and that's how they put on their weight. So it's like I would just shovel down as much food as I could handle before I had a sleep.
The method process. How was it for your family having you? Because having seen the film, Genesis Portini does not strike me as the sort of guy who would be easy to live with. And I can only imagine that you being in character for a month must have been fairly trying for those closest to you.
Yeah. Let's not talk about that.
Yeah.
I'm still making up for that.
Yeah.
It was a big ask of my family.
Yeah.
And they were awesome, and they are awesome. And so, see, one of the strategies, processes that James suggested was that I not have contact with my family for the period. I was like going, well, bro, there's a line, and that's where I think that I couldn't have done it without them, really.
Yeah.
Because potentially, if you really fully commit to a guy who's got bipolar, you don't know where that's going to end up. You don't want to end up like, and I ended up in some pretty interesting places as it was.
Yeah.
So I needed one healthy aspect of myself to keep me grounded. You have
a unique life, in that you, from an outsider's perspective, it seems like you're spinning plates all the time. I mean, even as you were in production, you had to negotiate to head back to the States, didn't you, for gang related?
For gang related. Well, that's a long story. In that, I first came to New Zealand, I think, in the end of August or end of September somewhere, because Tom, the producer, had told me that they'd be ready to go into production. I told him he wouldn't, because I've produced, and I'm like going, bro, you're not ready. And he was like, bro, I'm ready. I'm like going, bro, you're not ready. I was like going, and it's like going, bro, we're ready. We have no option but to be ready. All the financing is done. We're ready. We're going to be ready. Trust me, we got it. I'm like going, all right, these guys don't know what they're doing, But I talked to the film commission. I talked to a couple of people, and I thought, okay. I said, all right, bro, I'm going to pack up. The family's going to pack up. We're going to come back home. You better be ready. We packed up. We came home. They were not ready.
Right.
They got me a rental car, and that was it. It's like they had some kind of deal. They were not ready.
Yeah.
And so we sat around for a month. They said, where are you going to be ready? Well, I'll be ready in December. It's like, that's 2 months away. I've turned down work. I've packed up the house. I've done all sorts of things. I've moved my family, and we're sitting here for 2 months, and they're not ready. Like, not cool.
Not cool.
So December rolls around, and they're not ready. It's like, they're not going to be ready. I said, when are you going to be ready? It's like, oh, sorry, we'll be ready in January. I'm like going, bro, not cool. So I was like, I said, okay, I'm going to go and do a film. So I had a job offer came in. I went off and did a film called The Last Nights with Clive Owen and Morgan Freeman. Then I came back and I went off and did that. And I came back at the end of January. They were not ready. I'm like, oh man.
And you stayed with them. I mean, you must have
Oh,
believed
yeah.
in the project by this stage.
No, I committed.
Yeah.
I committed to the project. It's like.
But did you commit to this?
But also, no, I'm a producer, so I
Yeah.
understand. I already knew that they. Here's the thing: the disastrous thing if they continued to insist that they were ready, and we rolled into production and they weren't ready. So I commended them for having the good sense to realize that they were not ready and to take more time. So I was like going, good choice. That's the right choice. You're not ready.
Yeah.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
So, and I agree. It's like, so then they got to January and they still weren't ready. I think it was another month
Yeah.
in. And then we started prep and I was like going, this has now chewed an entire year. And families need to be fed, it's
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
and I'm sitting around
Yeah.
with my finger near the proverbial. And, it's like, it's like, I gotta work,
Yeah.
So the pilot offer came in, so we started the prep process, and I said, sorry, James, that amazing process and prep thing that you had in mind, not gonna happen. I gotta go and work, because after this film finally finishes, it'll be somewhere, I can't remember what it'll be, like June will be finished now. I've done a year, like, sitting around this for this little indie, covering the costs of all of that, and, not cool.
How do you balance it then between?
So what I did is I went and did the pilot.
Yeah.
So that if the pilot got picked up, that after we complete filming, then I'll just roll straight in. So basically I had to go and do this pilot in the middle of it. But I like that. That's what makes it fun.
It's
And so I rolled in the prep for one character and the other. And the other character, I'm playing a much older guy, who's the father figure of guys my own age.
Yeah.
And so I've got a cast member who plays my son, who's the same age as me, and and so all the weight that I was putting on for Jen actually served really well for like this other character who was middle-aged spread kind of guy and wearing comfy suits and comfy shoes, being a sort of a gangster type sort of guy who's just doesn't want to be out in the field anymore. So the weight actually worked well, and then I had a lot of hair for that, and I hadn't made decisions. We hadn't made decisions about. I was thinking like, Jen loved hairstyles. He would have a mohawk. He would have a shaved head. He would have like this cool kind of like Don King sort of. His version of the Don King thing became a bit of a thing for a while, like spiky long hair on top. He was just a character, man. He'd just do all sorts of fun things with his hair. So anything was on the table.
What do you
So
want?
I grew all of this hair, which worked in really well with the other character, gang related, where I created this kind of like 80s style sort of bouffon-y thing with a big goatee. And we grade that up and gives us age and a bit of makeup and
Involves your uncle.
and I'm talking like this, So
Yeah.
El Mexicano.
What do you want from this film? What do you want it to achieve? I mean, I know there's a lot of buzz and things. It doesn't open for a couple of weeks, but it's a unique New Zealand story.
What I want for the film,
Yeah.
I want people to see it and then decide whether it was a good film for them to see. And that's all we ask is, come and check it out. And I think that, now, all of that's the process. James and Tom, I think they did an amazing job. They're incredibly talented, incredibly hardworking, and very, very smart. So I want them to have greater success. Any win in our community for anyone is a win for everyone. What I want for the family of Jen is I want them to be celebrated, because Noble and Jedi, they're still contributing to their society. They're still working with kids in our community. They're still, running programs for these kids. I want them to be celebrated. This is like, unsung heroes. So I think that people in our community need to be recognized. So I want them to be recognized. I want Nat, Jen's wife, the women that support the people in our communities that contribute in the way, and she's a teacher in her own right. So I want those people to be celebrated. I want them to feel really good about who they are.
Yeah.
And I want us all to recognise them as much as we possibly can. And I want New Zealand audiences to celebrate our stories and to grow faith in our industry that we can tell stories that are quality stories with great projects, so we can get to do it again. Because I think a great New Zealand film used to come out once every 10 years, and now we're doing it once every 5 years. I want to see our industry producing, a marquee production in terms of quality of story and characters, and something that New Zealanders can embrace as iconic once a year at least. So
Yeah.
I got a lot of wants. That was a big question, and I got a lot of.
Well, it's a great answer. I mean, for what was a complicated process and an elongated production, you have delivered a gem. So thank you. It's a great film. I really enjoyed it. I implore people to get out there and see it. It opens July 31st. The Dark Horse. Cliff Curtis, thank you so much for your time, and look forward to seeing you again soon.
All right, brother. Kia ora.